There's just a lot of things that happen with playing with temperature, basically, and being comfortable, getting uncomfortable with both cold and heat. I would do that, and I would also get yourself a
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Better Humanology podcast. I am pumped up to introduce today's guest. His name is Ben Greenfield. Maybe you've heard of him. He runs a website called bengreenfieldfitness.com where he is helping you achieve your goals by optimizing your lifestyle parameters, and it goes way beyond just exercise and healthy eating. You learn about fat burning efficiency zones, gut health, mental performance, maximizing recovery, and a whole lot more. He has a ton of great information, and he shares a lot of that with us today. Today's topic is Biohacking 101 is what I'm going to call it. All about biohacking, improving your performance, becoming a better human being, and hacking your way to getting there. You might want to get a pen and piece of paper out for today's episode, jot down some notes, have some pretty actionable information that you're going to want to get after by the end of this podcast. And I know it has, the conversation I had with Ben has sparked some new experiments we're going to be doing here at the Better Humanology podcast. So super psyched out to have Ben on the podcast today. But before we hop into the podcast, we have launched a new training series all about barbell programming. And if you want to be a part of that, you still can right now if you go to onebarbell.com. So it's just onebarbell.com, all spelled out, O-N-E, and you can sign up for this new training series that we have that's all about getting stronger, faster, and fitter with a barbell and not a lot of equipment. So if that sounds interesting to you, go sign up for that training video series. But either way, super pumped to have been on the podcast today. So let's jump in and see what he has to say about biohacking. All right, Ben, I am super stoked to have you on the show. I've been following your website for a long time. I love all the articles you write, extremely well researched, great information. So just super glad to have you on the Better Humanology podcast.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on the Better Humanology podcast.
Yeah, man, no problem.
That's quite a mouthful, by the way. But I will add that phrase to my vernacular.
Better Humanology, yeah.
Humanology.
Yeah, man. So I'm sure a lot of people already know, a little bit about what you're doing and who you are. But can you give us, your background, what you're doing now, what you're most passionate about? Tell everyone a little bit about who you are.
Honestly, I just go to bengreenfieldfitness.com and click the about section, because honestly the bio is a little bit long. But in short, I'm an author and a speaker and a consultant in the health, the wellness, the anti-aging, and the physical and mental performance sectors. So I travel around the world speaking at events. I write articles for magazines, for websites, and for my own blog. I podcast, and my podcast is the Ben Greenfield Fitness Show, in which we cover everything from biohacking and supplements to fitness and natural remedies. And then I also I live on a little self-sustainable off-the-grid homestead out here in Spokane, Washington, where we grow all our own food and harvest eggs from our chickens and milk goats and basically swing from trees like monkeys and just basically kind of a quiet little life out here.
That sounds perfect. My wife, we're trying to break into the chicken world right now. She wants me to build a chicken coop and all this other stuff. But that's really cool that you got all that going on in Spokane. One thing you did mention was biohacking, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. I think it's a really cool field of study, if you will. But I kind of want to get your take, or maybe your personal definition of what biohacking is, because I do feel like some people see it a little bit differently than others. So what's your take on biohacking?
You mean like how I would define it?
Yeah, how would you define biohacking?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, honestly, it's, when you look at the word from a word root standpoint, it's just basically hacking the biology, or essentially doing something to make a biological system work faster, work more efficiently, or do something that may have not been its original intended purpose. So that could be anything from having your eyes operated on to adjust your rods and cones to be able to have night vision, to putting springs or extra padding, or an insert kind of like a breast implant into the bottom of your foot, to doing simpler things like using supplements such as smart drugs or neurotropics to enhance the function of your cognition, or using special reading glasses to increase your reading speed, or to block certain spectrums of light from reaching your eyes. To fitness biohacks, right? So rather than just exercising on a treadmill, inside of a sauna, wearing an elevation training mask with an electrostimulant attached to your biceps, so you're working your arms at the same time that you're working your legs, and putting extra stress on your lungs and your cardiovascular system. So it's a wide range of things that you can do when it comes to biohacking, but ultimately, it really is just hacking the biology in the same way that a technologist might hack a computer.
Dude, that sounds like some pretty awesome stuff. Some stuff I'd be very interested in trying, because something we do on our podcast is we do have interviews and guests from time to time, but we also like to do what we call our own experiments. And I guess you could see some of them kind of in the biohacking world. We actually did one towards the beginning on cold thermogenesis, and we actually got the majority of that information from your site. So thanks for putting that out there. But that was a lot of fun. I do want to know how you got into biohacking, or maybe you remember your first biohack. How did that all come about?
You know what? I have no clue what my first biohack was, because I don't really keep track of that kind of stuff, to be honest with you. Like I would say maybe it was putting on an elevation training mask before I went for a run, or maybe it was, using electrostimulation to help to heal a muscle area faster. I could probably tell you that, so some of the things that I adopted early on in my days of looking into like fitness technology and nutrition and things like that would probably have been way back in the day when I was a bodybuilder and I was attempting to achieve 3% body fat in order to, be able to pose on stage. And so, in a situation like that, biohacks that I'd use would be like a sodium load followed by a sodium depletion, so that the body took on a bunch of water, and then taking like a diuretic to pee off that water and to get the skin very tight against the muscle, followed by use of something like nitric oxide backstage before the show to be able to bring out vasculature. And that's just an example of like supplementation and nutrition used to hack your aesthetic appearance, right? Like how you look naked or close to naked while posing on stage. Another example would be, for something like Ironman triathlon. I remember back in the day getting a front-mounted swim snorkel that I could swim with to be able to enhance my ability to focus on my swim stroke underwater without having to be distracted by breathing. But then also that front-mounted swim snorkel it came with an oxygen flow restrictor or an airflow restrictor, so that my inspiratory and expiratory muscles would have to work harder while I was swimming, so that when I took the snorkel off, it felt like I was working a little less hard. So, and that's an example of like a piece of gear that might be considered like a biohack. I've never actually gotten any type of implantation or surgeries. I've never installed any type of nanotechnology or anything of that nature in my body, because I always am cognizant of studies or lack thereof that might show that there is no long-term research in terms of the efficacy or the safety of specific things like that. And so I'm pretty careful with things like getting Bluetooth or Wi-Fi near the gray matter in my skull, even though there are some pretty good like meditation apps out there and sleep tracking devices that would indeed subject me to that. Has more cons associated with it for me than pros. Another example of something that I won't do is I won't even wear like a self-quantification device like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch all day long, again, because primarily of the exposure to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi signals. I'd be very careful with nanotechnology implants for monitoring things like blood pressure or hormones, simply because of the propensity for nanomolecules, in the same way that like nanoparticles from tattoos can get into your bloodstream and create some issues with like carbon poisoning. You can potentially get the same thing when you have anything that might, for example, leach metal or leach a synthetic compound into the body. So I haven't really gotten on like the implant bandwagon. I don't have calf implants; they're all natural. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, and so you kind of got into biohacking out of having an inquisitive and curious mind and wanting to be more efficient. It wasn't something where you necessarily saw performance lacking and you wanted to, see if you could change it through a hack or whatever the case is.
Well, I certainly do a lot of blood and biomarker tracking. So I work with a company called Wellness FX, and every quarter I test all my hormones, red blood cells, white blood cells, liver, kidney, electrolytes, inflammation markers, thyroid, etc. And I do that 4 times a year to see how my diet, my supplementation, my lifestyle, everything is affecting the quality of my internal biomarkers. And I also do a poop panel once a year where I test parasites, yeast, fungus, bacterial balance, presence of candida, things along those lines, enzyme sufficiency in the digestive tract. And then every day I test my nervous system using something called a heart rate variability app, where just for a brief period of time, I put on a heart rate monitor 5 minutes each morning and take that measurement. So, you could say that every day I'm doing a brief period of time quantifying, and then every quarter I'm quantifying blood, and every year I'm quantifying my gut. And when I first began quantifying my blood and biomarkers, to answer your question, I did notice some things that I was concerned about that weren't strictly related to a lack of performance, but perhaps impending health issues that were a little bit more pressing and concerning than just, can I go faster? Can I get stronger? Things that could eventually cause some chronic disease. For example, very, very high levels of cortisol. Which a lot of people struggle with. And when you have hypercortisolism, that can, it decreases fertility, and your Leydig cells in your testes begin producing less testosterone. And the testosterone that they do produce gets bound up to something called sex hormone binding globulin, because your body wants to shut off fertility when you are stressed out. It doesn't make sense for somebody, to go out and propagate future generations if they're going to get eaten by lions, right? And so the body has like this built-in mechanism to lower fertility in both men and women when you're under stress, whether the stress is from exercise or from relationships or the environment. And I also noticed that I personally was experiencing thyroid dysregulation, so very, very high levels of thyroid stimulating hormone. Most doctors won't really give that a second glance unless it's significantly above about 4, but honestly, most people are slipping into thyroid dysregulation if it rises above 2, and mine was up around 5, showing that for some reason my body was either shutting down thyroid hormone production or decreasing the conversion of inactive to active thyroid hormone. And so that was also quite concerning to me. Those are probably the 2 biggest things that I saw when I first started quantifying that kind of made me want to hack those numbers, if you want to use that term. So, I went after hypercortisolism with sleep, de-stress, yoga, journaling, meditation, a gratitude practice, prayer, more time spent just like in nature, and essentially kind of like slowing down life. And that directly affected the sex hormone binding globulin as well, of course. I went after the thyroid hormone by actually at that point in my life adding more carbohydrates to my diet to assist with inactive T3 hormone or inactive T4 hormone to active T3 hormone. I also started eating more organ meats for hormonal support, like liver, for example, and sweetbreads and head cheeses and more of these ancestral meats. And I also began using a little little bit more iodine and selenium, more seaweed, more Brazil nuts, things along those lines. So, I've certainly done some biohacking, not just to increase performance, but also to stave off what I would consider to be elements that could eventually cause things like chronic disease. So, so I've kind of done both. That type of biohack is way different than wearing an elevation training mask while riding a bicycle in a sauna, but it's still something that's valuable to do.
Yeah, man, I find all that very fascinating. Testing my blood, getting regular blood tests is something I've been wanting to do. When I was in the military, we did blood testing. I mean, not to the extent that you really want them to, but that's probably all they would really pay for. But now, being out of the military, I wanted to start doing something like what you're talking about, this quarterly blood testing, getting smart on what markers to look for and what's good and what's bad. I know there are a lot of things, these kind of online blood tests where you put in your information, you show up at a lab, you get your blood drawn, and then they kind of break it down for you. Or you could just go to your doctor and get it done. What is your opinion on the two? Do you go to your doctor, or you have one of these, I don't even know what to call them, blood testing companies do it for you, and you kind of read it yourself?
Well, it depends, because, for example, excuse me, for the gut panel, I can order that to my house, and I can get it for about $4.99 from Direct Labs. And I can also go to my local naturopathic physician here, Toby Halowitz. He's a guy I've had on my podcast before, and I can have him order it for me, assuming that he has a meeting with me, right? Like he's legally required to meet with me for whatever, an office appointment, right? Like 10, 15, 20 minutes. He can order that same panel for me. We can bill insurance, and we can get it for $99 instead of $4.99. And then I just have to consider, in a scenario like that, whether setting up the appointment, driving to the appointment, making the appointment, and then coming back typically to get a kit at a later time is worth the extra $400. And usually, or is worth saving the $400. Usually in a case like that, it is. In the case of blood and biomarker testing, I don't really go through a physician for that. And the reason for that is, unless you're doing it to manage disease, it's more difficult to actually get that covered by insurance compared to getting something like a gut panel covered by insurance. I don't know why that is. I'm not quite an insurance specialist, but for some reason, that's just what I've experienced. And then B, it's very, very simple to order a blood lab test online, choose the parameters that you want to test, which in some cases I found doctors to be reluctant to do that, right? Like to pick and choose certain parameters versus just ordering a whole panel of tests. And then you can print off what's called a requisition form, which is something that's given to you online after you purchase a test through, let's say, a company like WellnessFX. Or I even list all of my favorite tests that I run on myself and my clients over at Greenfield Fitness Systems.com. And once you have that requisition form, you print it off, you find a lab near your house. It comes with instructions for finding a lab. There are like 4 labs within about 10 miles of my house, right? So and I live in a pretty small area in Spokane, Washington. So it's surprising how many of these labs like LabCorp exist. You go in, you get the blood draw, you leave, and you don't pay anybody when you go in for the blood draw. You just bring in the form that you've printed off because you already paid online. And then you get the results emailed to you or uploaded to your online dashboard within typically anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks, depending on the complexity of the test that you had performed on you. And so that I do it that way. I don't go through my doctor. If I had a diagnosed medical issue that I was managing, let's say hypothyroidism or high blood pressure or something like that, and I probably could game the system. I probably could find a doc who would diagnose me with a disease that we could save money on ordering labs and get them covered by insurance. I just haven't really ventured into that, but it wouldn't be that hard to do. It's kind of like a lot of guys these days will go in and get a diagnosis of hypogonadism, right? If they've got slightly low testosterone, rather than paying attention to their sleep and de-stressing and more healthy fats and hormonal precursors in their diet and more sunshine and more vitamin D and all this stuff, they just decide to Band-Aid it with testosterone patch or cream or gel or injection, and very easily get that covered by insurance by simply finding a doc who's willing to diagnose them with hypogonadism, because frankly, it's profitable for both the physician and a pharmaceutical company to hook them up with testosterone, and it's also just a quick fix. So, it's not hard to find a doctor to hook you up with this stuff if you really want to kind of game the system, ultimately, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. That's something I definitely, like I said, I'm going to get into. So I will be looking into. You said you have some resources on your site for blood testing, right?
I do
The
at
system,
greenfieldfitnesssystems.com.
Okay, I'm going to check that out. Another thing, out of personal curiosity now, Sealfit. I'm doing one of their academies in like a few days.
Cool.
So, and some of the things that we talk about on our show are, mental toughness and grit and all that. So can you give me, kind of what it takes to get through one of these Sealfit events? I know you did the Academy, and then you did Kokoro. So you've done those. So, so what's your advice there?
Are you trying to use a podcast recording to get free consulting advice?
Yeah, that's my favorite part of
that's what I figured. Yeah, I've done that before. Okay, so basically with the Sealfit Academy, it's very different from the Kokoro, right? The Kokoro experience, you're there, you're going in, you're going to get beat up, you're going to come out the other end a stronger person, and it's anywhere from, like a 55 to a 65-hour crucible, and the goal is to make you suffer, and to make you suffer in a way that makes you a stronger person, that teaches you how to rely upon your teammates and both be a part of a team and lead a team, and to come out the other end having proven that you can do that. As opposed to something like let's say the Spartan death race, right? Which is designed to break you, but is not designed to turn you into a team player, or designed to make you someone who might be able to go with a platoon to engage in a mission. It's instead just designed to see how far you can go doing really silly, hard things until you quit. So there's kind of a difference between the two. And at Kokoro, you will survive no matter what. Like, as long as you don't say I quit, and as long as you're a team player, and as long as you will push through any injury that happens to you. I mean, like, if you are at Kokoro and you break your foot, you can finish Kokoro. It just means that 3 teammates might be people carrying you. And so you're learning how to be a part of a team. They're learning how to carry a teammate, and like, that's the deal with Sealfit, is like, you don't get kicked out of Kokoro unless you quit because of some individual personal problem, and it's usually more psychological than it is physical. So the academy that they have is more just didactic instruction in everything from Olympic weight training to log lifting together as a team to rucking, to all of these skills that, for example, a Navy SEAL would rely upon. And that's one thing that they get there, is people who are preparing for BUDS or preparing for the SEALs, or maybe even trying to hone their skills. They'll go and do the academy. Getting through the academy, all that involves is just, being mindful, listening to your instructor, showing up with the complete list of gear on the website that they recommend that you bring, like your correct pants and your name stencil on your shirt and all that jazz. And you just basically come in. There's not a terrible amount of sleep deprivation. There's a couple times you'll probably get woken up in the middle of the night to go on a mission or something like that, but it's not that bad. It's a lot of working out. 4 to 6 hours of physical activity per day, along with a lot of classroom time. Don't plan on much, email, business, talking on the phone, etc. But ultimately, the academy, you just show up, and you show up ready to be a team player. And really, it's not rocket science there. It's not one of those things where they're trying to break you.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I'll bring it back to biohacking now, because I do want to give some actionable, takeaways or challenges for my listeners. So you obviously expanded on how crazy biohacking can be, from very little things to all the way up to getting implants and stuff like that. But if someone's kind of new to this, because I'm looking at this as kind of a biohacking 101, maybe someone's not into it, maybe they want to get some blood tests or whatever, they're inspired from hearing you on this podcast. What are some other things that you recommend? Just one or two you could recommend someone do, starting tomorrow. They make it a habit, and it's going to make them, a better human being in the long run.
Yeah, I'll recommend 2 things that I would do right off the bat if I were going to get started. First, I would use temperature exposure, and a combination of heat exposure using pretty long periods of time, a couple times a week, either an infrared or dry sauna. And I would also do cold exposure via daily cold shower and or a weekly cold soak, because the nitric oxide production, the shift of adipose tissue to metabolically active brown fat tissue, the increase in stress resilience, the slight detoxification effect, the lowering of inflammatory cytokines. There's just a lot of things that happen with playing with temperature, basically, and being comfortable, getting uncomfortable with both cold and heat. I would do that, and I would also get yourself a good chest strap that's able to measure what's called your RR intervals, which is the period of time spent between each wave of your heart's electrical rhythm. And then I would download a heart rate variability app that relies upon a chest strap like that, as opposed to the camera on your phone, which is notoriously inaccurate for measuring something like your beat-to-beat variability in your heart. I have an app over at Greenfield Fitness Systems. It's called Nature Beat. That one works well. BioForce is good. iThlete is good. Sweet Beat is one. Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof exec guy, he's got an app. But essentially, what you do is you use this app. It's called an HRV, or heart rate variability app, every day to measure the resilience, the strength, and the preparedness of your nervous system, both your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. It is, like I mentioned earlier, one of the few self-quantification devices that does indeed emit a Bluetooth signal that I will use every day, albeit for a brief period of time in the morning for 5 minutes. And it gives me a very, very clear picture of the strength of my sympathetic, my fight or flight nervous system for the day, as well as my parasympathetic, my rest and digest nervous system for the day, so that I can choose my activities accordingly. And so that I can see that, say, heart rate variability is low, sympathetic nervous system is low, parasympathetic nervous system is low. I need to take an easy recovery day on which I might go for a nature walk and do some foam rolling. Or conversely, my parasympathetic nervous system is quite strong and resilient today, but my sympathetic nervous system is beat up. So I am okay doing aerobics, running, cycling, swimming, etc., but I should avoid any type of CrossFit WOD or weight training or high intensity interval training. And then finally, I might see that my parasympathetic nervous system might be ill-equipped for the day to handle voluminous aerobic activity, but my sympathetic nervous system is nice and strong and robust and can handle a hard weight training session or something intense. So very valuable way to kind of get into self-quantification and kind of hacking your training for the day based off of what you see there. So those are a couple of the ways that I would just delve into hacking your biology.
That's perfect, man. I really appreciate those two. Something I'm definitely going to try. We might even have that stuff on the podcast. In all honesty, I could probably keep you around for like 10 hours and pick your brain all day. But I will hop into the quickfire questions of the show where I don't keep you for too long. I appreciate all the information on biohacking. So the quickfire questions are just going to be, I'll give you a little question, and then you can give me a short answer or elaborate if you want. Up to you. All
okay.
Right. Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, man. The hardest workout you've ever done?
If you go to Esquire Magazine's website and you do a search for hardest workout ever created, it is a workout that some 70-year-old guy used to do like 3 times a week to get incredibly fit. And I think that's the closest I've ever gotten to rhabdo. Just look up the challenge called the hardest workout ever created. The guy, I cannot recall his name right now. He's a 70-year-old like surfer from Hawaii who invented it. But that's a pretty tough one.
I'm definitely going to have to check that out. All right, man. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Cold showers.
All right. Yeah, that was Joe DeSena's answer as well.
Nice.
Really cool. If you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One piece of equipment, probably just be a bar, like it's specifically a pull-up bar, just because it's so versatile, right? You can do pull-ups, you can do muscle-ups, you can do hangs, you can do swings, you can hang upside down for inversion therapy. So I'd say if I had to choose one, because just about everything else you can do with your body weight, right? But for a good solid amount of pulling, I'd go with a pull-up bar.
All right, man, I like it. All right, so now the most important question of the show. The best advice you have for becoming a better human, 100% open-ended.
I tell my kids 3 things that will make them happy, but not just happy, because that's really not a great ultimate goal, but fulfilled, able to have a good obituary and to, die with no regrets. Those three things are, first of all, surround yourself with love and relationships and family, and do not underestimate the importance of being with people that you love and being mindful and there and present when you're with them. Number two would be to engage yourself daily in something that fulfills your passion, even if that's not your job. I'm not one of those guys that thinks that you have to have a job that is your passion. I think it's okay to have work. Let's say you're logging, right? You may not really enjoy that much cutting down trees, sectioning them, carrying them, etc., but that's your job, so whatever. It's your lot in life. Stick with it, but also have something you're passionate about at the same time, whether that's guitar or dancing or reading or whatever, and do that every day. And then the final thing is to live for a greater purpose than just yourself. We're not a bunch of pieces of meat flying through the planet out for our own survival. We're also not a bunch of folks whose end purpose in life is to be happy, pursue happiness, make other people happy. There's so many people that say, do what makes you happy, help other people do what makes them happy. And sure, that's all great, but ultimately, when you look at the blue zones, for example, Dan Buettner just wrote a really good book about all these areas of extremely dense populations of like centenarians and old people and old functional happy people. And what they found was that in most situations, one of the characteristics, in addition to like love and family relationships and passion and all these other things I'm talking about, another thing that was present, and I'm not covering them all, but just something that I think really stands out to me and that I emphasize with myself and my kids, is a belief that there is some kind of a higher power, a higher purpose, something that is helping to direct our lives, and that it's not about despairing because you're completely in charge of your life and what you can't control, or despairing because we're just a bunch of pieces of meat flying through the planet, but believe that there is a greater story. And when you look at like some of the wonderful tales out there, like some of my favorite books, right? Like J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. There's always, there's this group of characters, but they're living out this greatest story that's been written for them, and they all have a role in the story. And so I tell my kids, believe that there is a higher power that is directing your lives, that is directing your story. And when you do go through a time of trial, despair, suffering, hard times, etc., lean on that foundation that you're not alone, that there is something out there controlling our lives that goes above and beyond just humans and the dimension that we live in. So that was a long answer. But those are the three things, right? Like love, relationship, family, doing something you're passionate about, and then belief in a higher power.
Hey man, I really appreciate that answer. It was really awesome and powerful. I really, it really resonates with me. So I appreciate that and you sharing that with us. All right, man. So that kind of wraps up the show. I do want to turn people on to what you're doing. So what's the best place for people to learn more about you or what you're doing, and maybe use some of your stuff or whatever you got?
Sure. bengreenfieldfitness.com. Good website with my, my article, my podcast, etc. If I don't say so myself. So bengreenfieldfitness.com. And then I have a book at beyondtrainingbook.com, like a 450 page tome that's full of performance and fat loss and digestion and sleep and hormone optimization advice and all sorts of stuff in there. So those are two good resources for you, bengreenfieldfitness.com and beyondtrainingbook.com. And
I will say, just second that completely. Your website is awesome. I do think that everyone should go check it out. As a fitness writer myself, it was your website that kind of inspired me to, not just write your opinions, but write your experience and then back it up as much as you can, by intelligent research. And I try to take a page out of your book when I do write my articles. So I appreciate the inspiration you've been to me and the inspiration you've been to the listeners over the last half hour or so in a podcast. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast, Ben.
All right, man. Well, thanks for having me on.
your best. Losers always whine about their best.